Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to be diving into the world of adult attachment styles.
Ooh.
We'll be looking at the book Attached by Amir Levine and Rachel Heller,
Okay.
and also this really cool blog post from The Pursuit, a therapy center.
Sounds interesting.
By the end of this deep dive, you'll understand how these attachment styles can impact adult relationships, and hopefully you can use this knowledge in your own relationships too.
It's really amazing how many people, go through life with no idea how their attachment style is affecting their relationships.
Yeah.
Like, there's this hidden script running in the background that shapes how we interact with the people closest to us.
Right, totally.
Yeah.
So, cracking open Attached, the authors introduce these three main attachment styles: anxious, avoidant, and secure.
And these styles, they're not just like categories or labels, right?
Right.
They represent like these fundamental patterns of how we think, feel, and behave in relationships.
Yeah, it's not about putting people in boxes,
It-
but it's more like, oh, I recognize that pattern of behavior.
Exactly.
So let's start with anxious attachment. Attached describes this style as having a real fear of abandonment, like a constant need for reassurance from your partner.
Yeah. And that fear, it can,
It's out up in different ways.
it can manifest itself in all sorts of ways,
Oh,
right?
right.
So think about someone, for example, with an anxious attachment style who gets a text from their partner
Okay.
saying that they're going to be late for dinner.
Okay.
Now, instead of just being like, okay, cool, no worries, they might start to overthink,
Right.
worrying, imagining all these worst case scenarios, and then like bombarding their partner with texts demanding an immediate response.
Yeah.
Right? Does that make sense?
That's such a good example because it's not just about like, oh, they want you to text back quickly.
Right.
It's like that behavior of, I need to hear from you right now or I'm going to freak out.
Exactly. It
Yeah.
comes from this deeper place of being afraid of being left, of being abandoned. And these fears often stem from, experiences early on in life, maybe where caregiving wasn't always consistent or predictable.
Right. So our childhood can really have a big impact
Absolutely.
on our adult relationship.
A huge impact, yeah.
It's so interesting how, like, these patterns from when we were kids
I know, right?
can still affect us in our relationships now.
Yeah, totally.
So we talked about anxious attachment, but what about avoidant attachment? What's that all about?
Okay, so avoidant attachment, it's kind of like the flip side,
Okay.
People with this style, they're all about independence. Like, they really value their own space.
Right. They need their alone time.
Yeah, exactly. And they might come across as like emotionally closed off or reserved, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So instead of always wanting that reassurance,
Mm-hmm.
like someone with an anxious style,
Right.
they might just shut down emotionally.
Yeah, kind of like they're putting up walls.
Interesting.
Because for them, expressing vulnerability or being super emotionally close, it can feel kind of suffocating. So for example, imagine a couple, right? And they're thinking about moving in together.
Okay.
Now, for many people, that's like a really exciting step.
Yeah, for sure.
But for someone with an avoidant attachment style, it could trigger this like panic.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like suddenly they feel trapped and they just want to like run in the opposite direction.
So it's like their instinct is to create distance
Right.
when things start to get too serious.
Exactly. They're like, whoa, too close. Got to back up.
Okay, that makes sense. And then there's secure attachment, right?
Yeah, secure attachment, that's the one everyone wants, right?
The holy grail of attachment styles.
Pretty much. But
Yeah.
really, it's about finding that balance,
Between being independent and being close to someone.
Exactly. Like you're comfortable with both.
Got it.
So securely attached people, they're usually pretty good at expressing their emotions, both good and bad.
Right. They're not afraid to be vulnerable.
Exactly. And they don't freak out when someone wants to be close to them.
They seem to have it all figured out.
Well, it's not about being perfect, right? But they've usually had those good, consistent relationships early on.
So they've learned how to trust and be in a healthy relationship.
Yeah, like they develop this secure base early on that allows them to feel safe and confident in their relationships now.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So we've got these three main attachment styles, but how do they actually play out in real life?
Right, right.
Because I know we have this blog post from The Pursuit,
Yes,
and they talk about this woman, Sarah.
yes. Sarah's story, it's a really great example of how understanding all of this, like attachment stuff, can actually lead to some pretty amazing changes.
Yeah, tell me more about Sarah.
Okay, so Sarah, she talks about how she always felt insecure in her relationships. Like she was always worried.
About her partner leaving.
Yeah, about whether her partners really loved her, and if they were going to leave.
Right, which makes sense, right? Because
Yeah.
that lines up with the whole, like, anxious attachment style.
Exactly. That fear of abandonment, it can be like this driving force in how someone acts in their relationships, you know?
Totally. So for Sarah, this fear, it caused a lot of problems in her relationships.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like she'd get upset if her partner didn't text back right away
Oh, I see.
or if they made plans without her.
Right,
But it
right.
wasn't until she actually read the book Attached that things started to click for her.
You know, sometimes it just takes that one thing, that one piece of information to make everything make sense.
Totally. Like that aha moment
Totally.
can be so powerful
Totally.
because you suddenly understand why you've been reacting the way you've been reacting.
Yeah, you're like, oh, so that's what's been going on.
Exactly. And in Sarah's case, realizing this about herself, it led her to therapy,
That's awesome.
which is great.
It's great that she took that step.
Yeah. And through therapy, she started to understand where all of this anxiety was coming from.
Right.
And she learned some healthier ways to cope with it.
Yeah, you know, therapy isn't just about understanding your attachment style. Right.
It's about actually giving you the tools to change those patterns, you
Yeah,
know?
exactly. It's like, okay, now that I know this about myself, how can I use this knowledge to actually grow?
Exactly. Exactly.
And Sarah's story is such a good example of that because she learned how to, like, talk to her partner about her needs
Communication is key.
without blaming them or, like, making demands, you know?
Yes, absolutely. Because it's not about like never expressing your needs.
Right.
It's about doing it in a way that brings you closer instead of pushing you apart,
So instead of saying something like, you never spend time with me.
which can feel like an attack.
Right, exactly. She learned how to say something like, hey, I really value spending quality time with you.
Right, which is so much more constructive.
Yes. And she learned how to do this in a way that was more, like, positive and productive, you know?
And the amazing thing about Sarah's story is that, like, she didn't just stop at understanding her attachment style.
Right.
She actually used it to make real positive changes. And it sounds like her relationship really benefited from that.
Oh, absolutely. Like, it totally transformed her relationship.
So she went from constantly needing this reassurance
Yeah.
to feeling secure and confident in herself and her relationship.
Exactly. And that's the thing about secure attachment, right?
What's that?
It's not something someone else can give you. It's about finding that security within yourself.
Oh, I love that.
And when you have that, when you feel secure in yourself,
Yeah.
then you can really show up in your relationships in a different way.
Wow. Sarah's story is so inspiring.
It is, right?
It's like, yeah, we might have these patterns from our past,
Yeah,
but we don't have to be stuck with them.
exactly. We have the power to change.
And like Sarah, we can learn and grow and create these amazing, fulfilling relationships.
Absolutely. And that's like the most empowering message of this whole attachment theory thing, you know?
Yeah, totally. It's not about labeling yourself.
Right.
It's about understanding yourself better.
Yes. It's about self-awareness, right?
Right.
And then using that knowledge to build the kind of relationships you want.
I love that. It's like we're learning how to rewrite the script of our relationships, you know,
Mhm.
the one we've been following without even realizing it.
Exactly. And the best part is this whole attachment thing, it's not just about you, right?
Right.
It's about everyone.
Understanding other people's attachment styles can be so helpful.
Totally. Like, even just recognizing some of these patterns in your partner can be huge.
Yeah, because then you can approach disagreements and stuff with more empathy, right?
Exactly. It's like instead of taking it personally when your partner does that thing.
Which we all do, by the way.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like we all take things personally.
All the time.
But instead of doing that, you could be like, okay, this might be their attachment style talking.
Right, exactly.
Right.
Like having this new lens to see things through, you know?
I like that, a new lens.
Like, imagine your partner, they always clam up when you're trying to have a heart-to-heart.
Yeah, they just shut down.
Exactly. And you used to think, oh, they just don't care about my feelings.
Right, but now you're like, maybe this is just how they deal with emotional stuff.
Exactly. And maybe it comes from an avoidant attachment style.
Right, so you're not excusing their behavior,
Right.
but you're understanding it a little better.
Exactly. And that understanding can make a world of difference in how you approach the situation, you know?
Totally, totally. It reminds me of that quote, I think it was Dr. Phil who said it.
Okay.
We can't change what we don't acknowledge.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Right, like first, you got to be aware of what's going on.
Absolutely. Awareness is always the first step, right?
Really?
And with this attachment stuff, that awareness can be so powerful because it's like, okay, now that I know this, I can actually start to make different choices, you know?
Yeah, it's so empowering.
It is. It's like you're not doomed to keep repeating the same patterns forever.
Totally. So for someone listening who's like, this is all great, but where do I even start?
Hmm.
What advice would you give them?
That's a great question. I'd say start by looking inward,
Okay.
like spend some time really thinking about your own patterns and relationships.
Journaling can be good for that.
Yes.
Uh,
Journaling's awesome. But yeah, like, have you noticed any of these anxious or avoidant tendencies in yourself?
right. Or maybe a little bit of both.
Totally. We don't always fit neatly into one box,
Okay.
right? But yeah, once you have a better grasp on your own attachment style, then you can start thinking about how to create more security in your relationships.
That's awesome. And, sometimes having a little extra support can be really helpful.
Oh, for sure.
So, for anyone who's interested in diving deeper into this stuff,
Yeah.
The Pursuit,
Yes. The therapy center.
they offer free consultation.
It's awesome.
Yeah, which is amazing.
That's great.
And it's not an ad or anything.
No.
It's just if this is something you're interested in learning more about,
Yeah, if this resonated with you.
they're a great resource.
Absolutely. And honestly,
Mm.
there's no shame in getting support, right?
None at all.
It's actually a really brave thing to do, to invest in yourself and your relationships like that.
Couldn't agree more. Well, this has been such a fascinating deep dive into attachment styles.
It has.
And I hope our listeners walked away with some valuable insights and a little more curiosity about their own relationship patterns.
Me too.
And remember, this isn't about putting yourself or anyone else in a box.
Right.
It's about understanding yourself better so you can build even stronger, healthier relationships.
It's about connection, right? Like at the end of the day, that's what we all want.
Totally. So as you go about your week, I want you to pay attention to your interactions with your loved ones.
Ooh, good idea.
See if you can spot any of these attachment styles at play. You might be surprised by what you notice. And until next time, keep those brains curious and those conversations flowing.